The Grand Assembly Hall of Station Nexus buzzed with tension as delegates from 17 stellar nations filled the tiered seating. The cavernous chamber, with its transparent dome revealing the breathtaking vista of swirling nebulae and distant stars, had witnessed countless diplomatic negotiations, but none quite as consequential as today's summit. Commander Jack Reynolds stood at the central podium, his navy blue Earth Diplomatic Corps uniform crisp against his tall frame. His posture was military perfect, but sweat beaded at his temples as he faced the Intergalactic Council. Earth's petition for expanded mining rights in the Kepler sector had taken years to reach this stage. If approved, it would finally give humanity the resources needed to compete in the galactic economy. The Kepler sector's asteroid belt contains minerals essential for our quantum propulsion research, Jack explained, his voice steady despite the scrutiny of dozens of alien diplomats. Earth requests access to just 12% of the belt, which our projections show would have minimal environmental impact while providing crucial resources for our developing technology. Jack advanced to his next slide, showing carefully prepared simulations of Earth's proposed mining operations. Furthermore, we've developed extraction methods that would. Must we continue with this charade? A melodic yet cutting voice interrupted. All heads turned toward the speaker. Ambassador Narala Tavin of the Auroran Consortium rose from her seat, her slender form graceful even in obvious disdain. The iridescent scales across her face caught the light as she moved, shifting from deep azure to violet. Her eyes, large, almond-shaped, and entirely black, fixed on Jack with cold precision. Ambassador Tavin, the council moderator began, Commander Reynolds has the floor, and he is wasting our valuable time, Narala replied, her voice carrying effortlessly across the chamber. I have studied the Earth proposal in detail, and it is nothing but a poorly disguised attempt to gain military advantage in a sector they have no legitimate claim to. Jack felt his heart rate spike. This wasn't the formal objection phase yet. Narala was deliberately derailing his presentation. Ambassador, he countered, if you'll allow me to finish. I've examined your extraction technology patents. Commander, she continued as if he hadn't spoken. With a flick of her six-fingered hand, she projected her own display into the center of the hall. These designs are clearly adaptable for weapons-grade material refinement. The Council should also note that Earth's proposed mining operation falls suspiciously close to 3 major trade routes. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Jack attempted to interject, but Narala was relentless. The humans wish us to believe they've suddenly developed an interest in clean mining, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she used air quotes, an oddly human gesture that made Jack's blood boil. Yet their own planetary history is a testament to environmental devastation. They destroyed their own ecosystems before they even achieved space travel. That's ancient history, Jack snapped, abandoning diplomacy in his frustration. Earth has been carbon neutral for over a century. A century? Narala laughed, the sound like wind chimes yet somehow mocking. The Auroran Consortium has maintained perfect ecological balance for millennia. 100 years of not actively destroying your planet hardly qualifies you for galactic resource management. She turned to address the Council directly. The humans' technological understanding is rudimentary at best. Their proposal contains no fewer than 17 critical oversights that would lead to gravitational disruptions throughout the sector. I prepared a comprehensive analysis. Jack watched in mounting horror as Narala systematically dismantled his proposal point by point. Her analysis was exaggerated and selective, focusing on worst-case scenarios while ignoring the safeguards Earth had designed, but her delivery was masterful. She combined technical expertise with political innuendo, suggesting that humanity wasn't merely incompetent, but potentially dangerous. In conclusion, she finally said, her black eyes sweeping across the chamber, the Auroran Consortium formally opposes Earth's petition. We recommend instead that the Kepler sector remain under neutral protection for at least another century. until humanity has demonstrated both the technological capability and ethical maturity to participate in such delicate operations. The damage was done. Jack could see it in the body language of the delegates, the subtle shifting, the glances exchanged. Even Earth's traditional allies among the Council appeared uncomfortable. What should have been a straightforward approval had become a diplomatic disaster. Jack's presentation concluded with stilted responses to technical questions that, thanks to Narala's intervention, now focused entirely on potential risks rather than benefits. As the session adjourned for deliberation, he knew the petition was as good as rejected. In the atrium outside the chamber, diplomats clustered in small groups, their hushed conversations surely centered on Earth's humiliation. Jack stood alone, reviewing his presentation notes on his tablet, though he knew it was pointless now. Commander Reynolds. The melodic voice he'd grown to hate made him look up. Narala Tavin approached, flanked by two Auroran aides. A valiant effort, but perhaps your species should focus on mastering your own solar system before reaching further. Something inside Jack snapped. 3 years of preparation, countless hours navigating Earth's fractious politics to build consensus, all destroyed in minutes by this smug, superior alien who seemed to delight in humanity's failure. Was humiliating Earth really necessary? He asked quietly. You could have raised your objections during the formal review. Politics is rarely about necessity, Commander, she replied, her head tilting slightly. It's about advantage. The consortium has interests in the Kepler sector that would be complicated by human presence. So this wasn't about environmental concerns at all. You lied to the Council. I presented facts in a manner most beneficial to my people, she corrected, as you attempted to do for yours. I simply did it better. Her mouth, lipless and seemingly fixed in a slight smile, somehow managed to convey smugness. Perhaps in another century, humans will learn the subtleties of interstellar diplomacy. She turned to leave, but Jack wasn't finished. We needed those resources. There are colonies in the outer system struggling with supply shortages. Not my concern, Narala said dismissively. The strong survive in this galaxy, Commander. Humans should understand natural selection better than most. She glided away toward a gathering of diplomats from the powerful hegemony worlds. Jack watched as she seamlessly integrated herself into their circle, accepting what appeared to be congratulations with practiced modesty. The reception following the council session was mandatory for all delegates, a tradition meant to ease tensions after contentious deliberations. Jack moved through the crowded hall mechanically, accepting sympathetic platitudes from Earth's few allies while avoiding the pitying glances from everyone else. He was contemplating an early exit when he overheard Narala's melodic laugh from nearby. She stood with a group of hegemony officials, a glass of some phosphorescent liquid in her hand. Their proposal was so fundamentally flawed, I honestly wondered if they'd even consulted proper physicists, she was saying. Though I suppose Earth's understanding of quantum mechanics is still in its infancy. The hegemony delegates chuckled indulgently. Jack felt his face burn. Not content with defeating Earth's petition, Narala was now using their failure as cocktail party entertainment. Something reckless ignited in Jack's mind. Earth had lost today, but perhaps there was still a way to strike back at the arrogant ambassador who seemed to take such pleasure in humanity's humiliation. Not for his sake. His career in the diplomatic corps was likely finished after this disaster, but for Earth's dignity. The reception continued late into the station's artificial night. As diplomatic gatherings often did, it gradually transformed from formal networking to more relaxed socialization. The lighting dimmed, music from a dozen worlds played softly, and alcoholic beverages flowed more freely. Jack observed Narala throughout the evening. Despite her composed exterior, he noticed she was drinking steadily, some kind of glowing blue spirit that seemed to affect even her alien physiology. Her gestures became more animated, her famous composure slightly frayed at the edges. His opportunity came when she separated from her entourage, heading toward one of the observation balconies that ringed the reception hall. Jack followed, his heart pounding with adrenaline and the effects of several glasses of whiskey. The balcony offered a spectacular view of the nebula beyond the station. Narala stood alone at the railing, her slender form silhouetted against the cosmic backdrop. "Enjoying your victory, Ambassador?" Jack asked, stepping onto the balcony. She turned, her black eyes reflecting the stars. "Commander Reynolds, come to concede defeat in person." "I came to understand my opponent better," he said, moving beside her at the railing. "Know thy enemy, as we primitive humans say." "We're not enemies, Commander," she said, sipping her luminescent drink. "Merely representatives of different interests. Nothing personal." "It felt personal when you ambushed my presentation." Narala shrugged, a surprisingly human gesture. "Political theater. The Council responds to strength, not fairness." "Is that the famous Auroran superiority? Winning by any means necessary?" "You mistake superiority for difference," she said, turning to face him fully. "Aurorans value harmony and long-term stability. Humans charge forward without considering consequences. It makes you dangerous and fascinating." Something in her tone shifted with that last word. Jack suddenly realized how close they were standing, alone on the darkened balcony. "Fascinating," he echoed. "Your species' impulsivity," she clarified, though her gaze remained fixed on his face. "So driven by emotion rather than reason. We've eliminated such inefficiencies." "Have you really?" Jack took a deliberate step closer. "Then why did you follow me out here?" "You followed me," she corrected, but didn't move away. "And yet you're still talking to the representative of a species you just publicly humiliated. Curious behavior for a purely rational being." Narala's scales rippled with color, blue to purple to something almost crimson. Was that the Auroran equivalent of a blush? Jack hadn't planned what happened next, not consciously. It was impulse, anger, attraction, and recklessness combined into a single moment of madness. He kissed her. For one terrible second, he thought she might call security or worse. Then, shockingly, she responded, her alien mouth cool against his. What followed was a blur of sensations. Her scales smooth like polished stone beneath his fingers. The observation deck's privacy settings engaged with a hurried command, clothing discarded as they explored the strange territory of each other's bodies. It was liberation through self-destruction, Jack thought distantly. A final, desperate gambit to reclaim some sense of power after being so thoroughly defeated. Whether it was the alcohol, the emotional intensity of the day, or genuine attraction, Narala seemed equally caught in the moment's reckless gravity. Afterward, reality crashed back with crushing force. They dressed in awkward silence, avoiding eye contact. "This was," Narala began, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "A mistake," Jack finished for her. "Obviously, yes." Her composure returned visibly, scales settling into their normal azure hue. "One best forgotten immediately." "Agreed." Jack straightened his uniform. "Political theater, right? Nothing personal." He thought he saw something flash in those alien eyes. Anger, confusion, perhaps even hurt, but it vanished instantly behind her diplomatic mask. "Good night, Commander," she said formally, and left without another word. Jack remained on the balcony long after she'd gone, staring at the distant stars and wondering what madness had possessed him. It wasn't until much later that the true recklessness of his action occurred to him. Protection hadn't even crossed his mind. He dismissed the concern almost immediately. Human Auroran reproduction was surely impossible. Their biologies were too different. Weren't they? 3 months after the failed Kepler petition, Jack was reassigned to a minor diplomatic post on Europa. Everyone understood it was essentially a demotion, keeping him in the Corps out of respect for his previous service while removing him from any position of real influence. He accepted it without complaint, knowing he was lucky to have a career at all after the Council debacle. He had almost managed to forget the encounter with Narala when the secure communication arrived. The sender information was encrypted, but the message was blunt. Meeting required immediately. Matter of highest security. Coordinates attached. The location was a private diplomatic suite on Ganymede. Jack arranged emergency leave, telling his superiors only that a sensitive situation required his attention. He half expected an ambush when he arrived. Perhaps Nirala had filed some delayed complaint about his behavior, but found only the ambassador herself waiting, her usually immaculate appearance subtly disheveled. "You look terrible," he said without thinking. "How observant," she replied coldly. "Close the door." Jack complied, tension building in his chest. "What's this about, Ambassador?" "I'm pregnant," Nirala stated flatly. Jack stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "That's impossible." "Evidently not." Her black eyes bored into him. "Auroran medical technology confirms with absolute certainty. The embryo carries human DNA. Yours specifically. But our species, we're not even from the same evolutionary tree. How could we possibly?" "A question that's currently occupying the finest scientific minds in the consortium," she interrupted. "The preliminary theory involves certain similarities in our base genetic codes despite our different origins. 1,000,000 to 1 chance. Congratulations, Commander. You've managed to create an unprecedented xenobiological crisis." Jack sank into a chair, mind reeling. "I don't understand. Don't Aurorans have methods to prevent this kind of situation?" "Of course we do," she snapped. "But they're designed for compatibility with Auroran biology, not for whatever you are." Her scales flashed crimson. "This is a catastrophe of interstellar proportions." The implications began to dawn on Jack. "Your position would be instantly destroyed if this becomes public," she confirmed. "Auroran culture places enormous value on controlled reproduction. Children are planned generations in advance for optimal genetic compatibility and social placement. A half-human child born to an ambassador would be—" She seemed unable to find words adequate to the scandal. "What do you want from me?" Jack asked, still struggling to process the situation. "I want you to understand exactly what you've done," Nirala said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This isn't just about my career. This could destabilize the entire power structure of the consortium. There are factions who would use this to argue that Aurorans have been corrupted by contact with lesser species. It could set our diplomatic relations back decades." "It wasn't exactly a unilateral decision," Jack pointed out defensively. "A momentary lapse in judgment on my part," she acknowledged stiffly. "But I suspect for you, it was something else entirely." Jack felt cold. "What does that mean?" "Your career was destroyed that day in the council chamber. You had nothing left to lose," Nirala said, studying his face. "But I wonder if it was more than that. Was this your revenge, Commander? Did you plan to humiliate me as I had humiliated Earth?" "That's ridiculous," Jack protested, but the denial sounded hollow even to his own ears. While he hadn't consciously planned it, hadn't even thought pregnancy possible, wasn't there a part of him that had wanted to see the perfect ambassador Tavin brought low? To prove that beneath her superiority, she was vulnerable to the same impulses as everyone else? "The look on your face tells me everything," Nirala said quietly. "Know this, Commander Reynolds. If you thought to use this situation against me or the consortium, I will bring the full weight of Auroran influence down upon your species. Earth's petition to the Council will be the least of your concerns." "What exactly are you suggesting?" Jack asked, his mind racing. "That I engineered an impossible cross-species pregnancy as some kind of elaborate revenge scheme? I'm suggesting that you're going to help me manage this situation with absolute discretion," she replied. "Your career, your planet's standing, and possibly your personal safety depend on it." Jack rubbed his temples, feeling the beginnings of a migraine. "What exactly do you propose we do?" "For now, nothing public," Nirala said. "I've secured medical leave, citing a rare condition requiring treatment. My government knows the truth, but only at the highest levels. They're containing the situation while exploring options." "Options?" Her black eyes regarded him coldly. "Don't concern yourself with those details." Something in her tone triggered an unexpected protective instinct in Jack. "We're talking about a child. My child. I have a right to be concerned." "Your rights in this situation are precisely what I determined them to be," Nirala responded. "The next moves must be made carefully, with diplomatic consequences as the priority." "The priority should be the health of both you and the baby," Jack insisted, surprising himself with his vehemence. "How touchingly human," Nirala said, but her voice lacked its usual edge. "My health is being monitored constantly. As for the embryo, it presents unique challenges. Human and Auroran physiologies aren't designed to combine. There are complications." Jack studied her more carefully, noticing the fatigue evident in her posture and the unusual dullness of her usually vibrant scales. "You're not well." An astute observation. She sighed, a very human sound. "The pregnancy is taxing my system in unexpected ways. Auroran gestation is typically straightforward, but this hybrid situation is unprecedented." Before Jack could respond, his secure communicator chimed with an emergency alert. Simultaneously, Nirala's device emitted a series of musical tones. "We've been compromised," she said, checking her display. "Someone has been monitoring this meeting." Jack checked his own alert. "Earth Diplomatic Security is ordering me to return to Europa immediately." "What's happening?" "Politics," Nirala said grimly. "It seems our secret is out, at least to some extent. We've just lost control of the narrative." The next 48 hours unfolded in a whirlwind of secure briefings, tense negotiations, and increasingly alarming news. Someone, neither Earth nor the consortium would admit responsibility, had leaked information about an unprecedented diplomatic situation involving the Auroran ambassador and an Earth representative. While the exact nature remained vague in public channels, the interstellar diplomatic community was buzzing with speculation. Jack found himself effectively placed under protective custody by Earth's Diplomatic Security Service. He was debriefed repeatedly by increasingly senior officials, each session more intense than the last. It became clear that Earth's government viewed the situation as simultaneously a potential catastrophe and a possible strategic opportunity. "You understand the position you've put us in, Commander," said Admiral Helena Chun, the highest-ranking officer to interrogate him yet. "Relations with the Auroran Consortium are delicate at best. This could either destroy decades of progress or provide unexpected leverage. With all due respect, Admiral, we're talking about a child, not a bargaining chip," Jack responded, his protective instincts growing stronger by the hour. "A hybrid child with potentially significant scientific and political implications," the Admiral corrected. "Both Earth and Aurora have vested interests in how this situation develops." Jack learned that emergency meetings of the Intergalactic Council had been called. The Auroran Consortium was demanding complete privacy and control over the situation, while several other species were arguing that the unprecedented hybrid pregnancy had implications for all spacefaring races. 5 days after their meeting on Ganymede, Jack was informed he would be attending a high-level diplomatic session with Nirala and representatives from both governments. The location was a neutral medical facility on Ceres, chosen for both its discretion and its advanced xenobiological research capabilities. When Jack arrived under heavy security escort, he was shocked by Nirala's appearance. The vibrant ambassador now looked genuinely ill, her scales dulled to a flat gray, her slender frame somehow diminished. "Ambassador Tavin." He greeted her formally, aware of the dozen officials from both sides watching their every interaction. "Commander Reynolds," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I see your government is taking as much interest in this situation as mine." "How are you feeling?" he asked, lowering his voice. "Like I'm hosting an invasive alien life form," she replied dryly. "Which technically I am." Despite everything, Jack found himself smiling at her gallows humor. "I'm told the doctors here are the best in the system." "They'd better be," she murmured. "The alternative doesn't bear considering." The meeting that followed was a masterclass in high-pressure diplomacy. Earth and Auroran officials presented a unified public position. Ambassador Tavin and Commander Reynolds would cooperate in a groundbreaking scientific and cultural exchange related to the first-ever human-Auroran hybrid child. All medical decisions would be made jointly, with input from experts from both species. The child would receive diplomatic status for both worlds. Behind closed doors, the reality was far messier. The Aurorans clearly wanted to maintain maximum control, while Earth pushed for equal parental rights. Nirala and Jack found themselves in the bizarre position of being both the subject of negotiations and participants in them. "This is surreal," Jack whispered to Nirala during a brief recess. They stood by a viewport overlooking Ceres' stark landscape, momentarily away from their respective handlers. "They're discussing our child like it's a peace treaty." "In many ways, it is," Nirala said, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen. "This pregnancy has the potential to either bridge our cultures or drive them further apart." Jack studied her profile against the star field beyond the viewport. "I never asked what you want. Not what's diplomatically expedient, but what you actually want." Nirala was silent for a long moment. "What I want ceased to matter the moment we confirmed the pregnancy," she finally said. "My duty now is to my people to ensure this situation strengthens rather than weakens the consortium." "And the child?" "The child will be cared for appropriately," she said, but something in her voice suggested uncertainty. "That's not an answer," Jack pressed. Nirala turned to face him fully, her black eyes unreadable. "What would you have me say, Commander? That I'm experiencing the same irrational attachment to this embryo that humans seem prone to? That despite the diplomatic nightmare, the physical discomfort, and the uncertainty of what we've created, I find myself protective of it? Is that true?" Jack asked quietly. Before she could answer, they were called back to the negotiating table. The moment of vulnerability vanished as Nirala resumed her diplomatic persona, scales briefly flashing blue before settling back into their sickly gray. The official agreement, when finally reached, was a masterpiece of diplomatic compromise. On paper, it granted both Earth and Aurora equal standing in decisions regarding the child's future. In practice, it was filled with enough loopholes and ambiguities that either side could claim precedence under the right circumstances. Jack and Nirala were required to make a joint public statement, carefully scripted to present the pregnancy as a positive development for interspecies relations. Standing before the cameras, they performed their roles perfectly. The dignified Auroran ambassador and the steadfast Earth commander, united in their commitment to this unprecedented diplomatic bridge. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Nirala swayed dangerously. Jack caught her arm, alarmed by how light she felt. "Medical team now," he shouted, all protocol forgotten as her scales faded to an alarming, chalky white. The next hours passed in a blur of emergency medical procedures, frantic consultations, and escalating tension between the Earth and Auroran medical teams. The hybrid pregnancy was creating unexpected complications. The fetus was drawing on resources Nirala's body wasn't evolved to provide, while simultaneously rejecting certain elements of her physiology. "We need to synthesize a specialized nutrient solution," Dr. Karen Becky, the lead Earth physician, explained to Jack as they watched Nirala's unconscious form through a quarantine barrier. "Her system can't naturally support the human elements of the fetus's development." "Will she recover?" Jack asked, surprised by the depth of his concern. "If we get the formula right, yes," Dr. Becky said. "But we need more data about Auroran biochemistry than they're willing to share." Jack understood the problem immediately. Auroran biological information was among their most closely guarded secrets. Even with a life at stake, 2 lives, counting the child, their representatives were hesitant to share complete medical data with Earth scientists. Making a decision that could well end his diplomatic career for good, Jack bypassed proper channels and approached the Auroran chief medical officer directly. Dr. Alani Voss was a severe-looking female with scales so dark they appeared almost black. "Dr. Voss, we need to talk privately," Jack said, intercepting her in a corridor. "About Ambassador Tavin's condition. All communications should go through proper diplomatic channels, Commander," she replied stiffly. "Ambassador Tavin could die while we navigate protocols," Jack said bluntly. "I don't believe you want that outcome any more than I do." The Auroran physician studied him for a long moment. "Follow me," she finally said. In a secure medical office, Dr. Voss spoke frankly. "The consortium leadership is divided on this matter, Commander. Some factions see the ambassador's situation as politically inconvenient. They might not be entirely disturbed if natural complications resolve the problem. Jack felt cold fury rise in his chest. They let her die? Not actively, Dr. Voss clarified, but they might not authorize the full medical intervention required. The ambassador has powerful enemies who see this hybrid child as a threat to Auroran genetic purity. What do you need to save them both? Jack asked. Earth has certain synthetic biotechnology that we lack, the doctor admitted. Combined with our knowledge of Auroran physiology, we could likely develop an effective treatment. But I need authorization to share the necessary data. And if that authorization doesn't come, Dr. Voss's scales rippled with subtle color shifts. Then I would be unable to share it without committing treason against the consortium. Jack made a swift calculation. What if you didn't officially share it? What if the data was accessed without your knowledge? The Auroran doctor's expression remained impassive, but she deliberately placed her data tablet on the desk between them, then announced, I must check on the ambassador. I'll return in precisely 7 minutes. She left the office. Jack moved immediately, accessing the tablet with techniques learned during his intelligence training that was supposed to be used to protect Earth's interests, not to hack allied medical systems. Within the allotted 7 minutes, he had transferred the critical Auroran medical data to Dr. Mbecki's secure channel. When Dr. Voss returned exactly on schedule, the tablet was precisely where she had left it. I trust your brief solitude was uneventful, Commander, she said, with just the slightest emphasis. Completely uneventful, Jack confirmed. Thank you for your time, Doctor. Within hours, the Earth medical team had synthesized a specialized treatment using the mysteriously acquired Auroran biological data. Political tensions escalated when the consortium realized their closely guarded medical information had somehow been compromised, but with Narala's condition stabilizing, they were in no position to escalate the situation further. 3 days later, Narala regained consciousness. Jack was permitted a brief, supervised visit to her medical suite. You look better, he said truthfully. Her scales had regained some of their characteristic luster. So, I'm told, she replied, her voice weaker than he'd ever heard it. I understand I have you to thank for my recovery. Jack glanced at the medical monitors surrounding her bed. The doctors did all the work, with data they shouldn't have had access to, Narala said quietly. The consortium is displeased about the security breach. I don't know anything about that, Jack said carefully, aware of the surveillance in the room. A ghost of her former, sardonic smile crossed Narala's face. Of course not. She paused, then added, the fetus is developing normally now. The doctors believe the worst dangers have passed. That's good news, Jack said, genuinely relieved. Narala studied him with those impenetrable black eyes. Why did you do it, Commander? Risk your career, possibly your freedom, for an alien diplomat who humiliated your planet? For a hybrid child that, until recently, you didn't even know could exist? Jack considered his answer carefully. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. Politics aside, no child should pay for the choices of its parents. How very human, Narala remarked, but there was no mockery in her tone. Also, Jack added, I believe I'm at least partly responsible for this situation. Not just the obvious biological contribution, but you weren't entirely wrong before. There was an element of revenge in my actions that night. It wasn't planned, but it was there. Narala was silent for a moment. Perhaps we both acted from less than noble motivations, she finally conceded. But now we must deal with the consequences, which have grown far beyond either of us. Their conversation was cut short by the arrival of medical staff for Narala's scheduled treatments. As Jack was escorted out, she called after him. Commander, Jack. He turned, surprised by her use of his first name. Thank you, she said simply. For my life, and for our child's. Our child. The words echoed in Jack's mind long after he'd left the medical facility. The next 3 months brought a fragile stability to the situation. Narala's health improved steadily under the specialized treatment regime, though she remained under constant medical supervision. The diplomatic machinery of both Earth and Aurora worked overtime to manage the political implications of the pregnancy, which had become public knowledge throughout the galaxy. Jack found himself reinstated to active diplomatic service, though in a specialized role focused entirely on the Auroran diplomatic initiative, as the pregnancy was now officially called. He worked directly with Nerala to present a unified front to both their governments and the wider galactic community. They appeared together at carefully orchestrated press events, answered pre-approved questions, and were photographed in seemingly casual but meticulously planned interactions. Behind the scenes, they navigated an increasingly complex web of political interests, medical concerns, and personal adjustments. Another day, another performance, Nerala remarked after one particularly grueling press conference. They sat in her private quarters on the medical station, which had become their de facto headquarters. Her pregnancy was now visibly evident, her slender frame supporting a modest bump that, according to the doctors, contained a child with both human and Auroran characteristics. "You handled that reporter from the Hegemony News service masterfully," Jack commented, loosening the collar of his formal uniform. "I thought he was going to keep pushing about genetic engineering." "The Hegemony has its own agenda," Nerala said, easing herself onto a specially designed chair that accommodated her changing physiology. "They're hoping our child represents a breakthrough they can exploit for their hybrid species integration programs." "Everyone wants to use this situation for their own advantage," Jack observed. "Earth, Aurora, the Hegemony, the medical community. Sometimes I wonder if anyone cares about the actual child." Nerala's hand moved to her abdomen in what had become a habitual gesture. "We do," she said simply. "That will have to be enough." Jack looked at her in surprise. It was the first time she had so explicitly included him in her thinking about the child's future. "The latest scans are fascinating," she continued, activating a holographic display. "See here? The cellular structures are taking on hybrid characteristics unlike anything in either of our species. Dr. Voss believes our child may develop unique capabilities." Jack studied the complex medical imagery with limited comprehension. "As long as they're healthy," he said. "They will be," Nerala assured him with unexpected confidence. "Auroran pregnancies can be directed somewhat through maternal influence. I've been focusing my energies on ensuring optimal development." "I didn't know that was possible," Jack said, fascinated. "There's much about Auroran biology that isn't in your species databases," she replied with a hint of her old superiority, but tempered now with something almost like affection. Their fragile peace was shattered 3 weeks later when Jack was awakened in the middle of the night by urgent security alerts. Armed guards escorted him directly to the medical facility's secure command center, where he found chaos erupting. "What's happening?" he demanded of the first Earth official he recognized, a security coordinator named Barrett. "Attempted abduction of Ambassador Tavin," Barrett explained tersely. "A stealth shuttle docked without authorization 90 minutes ago. 6 operatives breached security and attempted to remove the ambassador from her quarters." Jack felt cold dread grip his heart. "Nerala, is she?" "She's safe," Barrett assured him. "Her personal security detail repelled the initial assault, and our teams responded within 60 seconds of the alarm. The attackers retreated, but not before 2 security personnel were seriously injured." "Who were they?" "Consortium dissidents." Barrett shook his head. "Preliminary identification suggests Hegemony special operations, though of course they'll deny involvement." "The Hegemony?" Jack was stunned. "Why would they?" "Think about it, Commander," a new voice interjected. Jack turned to see Admiral Chun entering the command center. "Your child represents the first viable human-Auroran hybrid in history. The genetic and biological implications alone make it immensely valuable, not to mention the political leverage." "Where's Ambassador Tavin now?" Jack demanded. "Secure medical isolation," the Admiral replied. "Her condition is stable, but the doctors are monitoring her closely. The stress of the attack caused some concerning vital sign fluctuations." "I need to see her." Admiral Chun nodded. "You've been cleared. In fact, the Auroran security chief specifically requested your presence. They're implementing some kind of joint protection protocol." Jack was escorted through multiple security checkpoints to reach Nirala's new location deep within the facility. When he finally entered her medical suite, he found her surrounded by both Earth and Auroran security personnel, her medical monitors beeping steadily. "Commander Reynolds," she acknowledged him, her voice stronger than he'd expected. "I understand we've had some unwelcome visitors. Are you all right?" he asked, moving to her bedside despite the hovering guards. "Physically unharmed," she replied, "though I must say I don't appreciate being treated as a valuable specimen to be collected." The Auroran security chief, a tall male with steel-gray scales, stepped forward. "Commander Reynolds, we are implementing advanced protection protocols. Ambassador Tavin's security is now our highest priority." "As it should be," Jack agreed. "But this facility may be compromised. We need to move her somewhere more secure." "That decision is being discussed at the highest levels," the security chief said. "Until then, we've quadrupled the guard rotation and implemented quantum-encrypted surveillance throughout this sector." Jack turned back to Nirala. "Did you see who attacked you?" "Briefly," she said, her hand protectively covering her abdomen. "They were using stealth tech, but I caught glimpses. Definitely hegemony operatives. I recognized their movement patterns from diplomatic security briefings." "The hegemony has denied all involvement," the Earth security officer interjected. "They're claiming it was a rogue operation." "Of course they are," Nirala said dryly. "Just as they denied involvement in the Procyon incident and the Rigel blockade. The hegemony never takes responsibility for its covert actions." Jack sat carefully on the edge of her bed. Why would they risk such a provocative move? They must know both Earth and Aurora would respond forcefully. "Our child," Nirala said simply. "The medical data indicates truly unique genetic developments. The hegemony has been attempting to create viable hybrids between compatible species for centuries, with limited success. They would consider our child an invaluable research subject." The clinical way she described the situation couldn't quite mask the protective fury in her voice. Jack found himself equally enraged at the thought of their child being treated as an experimental specimen. "We need to get ahead of this," he said. "If the hegemony is willing to attempt such a brazen abduction, they'll try again with more resources." Over the next 48 hours, Earth and Auroran security forces worked in unprecedented cooperation. Both governments, recognizing the shared threat, temporarily set aside their political differences. Jack and Nirala were moved to a new, classified location, a small medical research outpost hidden in the asteroid belt, its existence known only to a handful of officials from both species. The outpost was equipped with state-of-the-art medical facilities specifically designed for Nirala's unique pregnancy, along with security systems that would challenge even the hegemony's elite forces. Jack was officially assigned as Earth's primary representative, which meant living in close proximity to Nirala as her pregnancy progressed. "Home sweet home," he remarked as they settled into the outpost's living quarters. "At least until the baby arrives. I never anticipated spending the latter stages of gestation in an armed fortress," Nirala observed, examining the spartanly furnished common area. "Though I suppose it's better than a hegemony research facility." "Much better," Jack agreed grimly. "Our security teams believe they've identified the group behind the attack, a specialized hegemony acquisition unit that normally focuses on rare artifacts and technology. Apparently, they've now expanded into unique biological specimens." "How flattering," Nirala said sarcastically. "I've been upgraded from Diplomat to Specimen." Despite the circumstances, Jack found himself smiling. Nirala's sardonic humor had become oddly comforting in their shared crisis. Living in close quarters created a strange intimacy between them. Their days fell into a routine. Morning medical checks, security briefings, diplomatic video conferences with their respective governments, and then the long, quiet evenings where, with nowhere else to go and little else to do, they found themselves actually talking to each other. "Tell me about Aurora," Jack requested one evening as they shared a meal in the common area. "Not the official diplomatic profile, but what it's actually like to live there." Nirala considered the question, her scales shifting to a thoughtful blue-green. "It's beautiful in a way that's difficult to describe to non-Aurorans. The light from our binary stars creates color harmonics that your eyes probably couldn't even perceive. The architecture is designed to capture and enhance these harmonics. Buildings that literally sing with light. Sounds extraordinary, Jack said, genuinely interested. It is, she agreed, a note of homesickness in her voice. Our cities are built in perfect ecological balance with the surrounding wilderness. The transition between urban and natural spaces is so seamless that sometimes you don't realize you've left one for the other. She paused, studying him. What about Earth? Is it truly as chaotic as our cultural briefings suggest? Jack laughed. Probably. We've never quite mastered the art of perfect planning. Our cities grow organically, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. But there's an energy to them, a constant state of reinvention that I've never found anywhere else in the galaxy. I've only seen the diplomatic compounds, Nirala admitted. They're designed to shield aliens from Earth's intensity. You should see New York, Jack said. Or Bangkok. Or Lagos. Earth at its most human, messy, contradictory, and absolutely alive. Perhaps someday, she said. And for the first time, it didn't sound like a diplomatic platitude. As Nirala's pregnancy advanced, the medical team monitored the developing fetus with increasing fascination. The child was developing characteristics of both species, human organ structures with auroran cellular efficiency, a hybrid nervous system that showed unprecedented integrative capacity. The potential implications are staggering, Dr. Mbeki told them during one briefing. Your child's hybrid physiology suggests capabilities beyond either parent species. Will they be healthy? Nirala asked, the only question that seemed to matter to her. All indicators are positive, the doctor assured her. Different from either human or auroran norms, but fundamentally sound. Jack found himself increasingly invested in the child's development, attending every medical briefing and studying the reports with an intensity that surprised even him. He hadn't planned on fatherhood, certainly not under these circumstances, but the reality of it had awakened something fiercely protective in him. One night, he found Nirala in the observation dome, staring at the distant stars. Her pregnancy was now in its final stages, her slender form dramatically transformed by the growing child within. Trouble sleeping? He asked, joining her. Auroran pregnancies don't typically cause discomfort, she said. But then, this is hardly typical. She shifted position, wincing slightly. The human elements of the child's physiology are making themselves known. I'm sorry, Jack said, genuinely contrite. Don't be, she replied, surprising him. It's interesting, experiencing something so completely outside auroran norms. My people have engineered away most biological inconveniences, including the discomforts of reproduction. There's something almost primitive about this experience, connecting me to ancestral patterns my species left behind centuries ago. Jack hesitated, then asked the question that had been on his mind. For weeks. Do you ever regret it? Not the political complications or the security threats, but just this child with me. Nirala's black eyes reflected the starlight as she considered her answer. If you had asked me 6 months ago, the answer would have been an unqualified yes. Now, she placed her hand on her abdomen, where the child moved visibly beneath her skin. Now I find I cannot imagine any alternative. This child is unexpected in every possible way, but also somehow necessary. It was the most personal admission she had ever made to him. Jack found himself moved by her honesty. I never thought I'd say this, he admitted, but I'm beginning to feel the same way. Nirala studied him for a long moment. We will never have a conventional relationship, Commander. Our worlds, our cultures, our basic understanding of life is too different. I know, Jack acknowledged, but we'll always have this connection. This child. Yes, she agreed softly. Always. The moment was interrupted by the sudden blare of security alarms throughout the facility. Jack immediately moved to shield Nirala, his body tensing for danger. Security breach in Sector 4, announced the outpost's AI system. All personnel to emergency stations. Ow! Jack demanded of the nearest security officer who came running into the observation dome. This location is supposed to be completely classified. Unknown, sir, the officer replied, taking up a defensive position near Nirala. Security teams are responding. Please proceed to the safe room immediately. Jack helped Nirala to her feet, supporting her as they moved swiftly through the corridors toward the facility's most secure area. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of weapons fire. Hegemony? Nirala asked tersely as they hurried along. Or someone equally determined, Jack replied, keeping his body between her and any potential threat. The safe room has independent life support and communications. We can hold out there until reinforcements arrive. They had almost reached their destination when a section of ceiling exploded inward. 3 figures in advanced stealth armor dropped into the corridor, weapons raised. Ambassador Tavin, the lead figure announced through an electronic voice modulator. You will come with us. Resistance is inadvisable in your condition. Jack pushed Nirala behind him, drawing the sidearm he'd been issued after the first attack. Not happening, he said flatly. The lead intruder tilted their helmeted head. Commander Reynolds, your presence is not required. Stand aside and you will not be harmed. You'll have to kill me first, Jack stated, weapons steady despite being dramatically outgunned. To his surprise, Nirala stepped forward, her black eyes cold with fury. You've miscalculated, she told the intruders, her voice deadly calm. Perhaps you believe that in my condition, I am vulnerable. Allow me to correct that misunderstanding. Before Jack could react, Nirala's scales flashed with brilliant light. Not the subtle color changes he'd observed before, but an intense, almost blinding illumination. The intruders staggered back, their electronic systems clearly disrupted by whatever energy Nirala was emitting. Auroran defensive capabilities are classified for a reason, she said, advancing on the disoriented attackers. Now, shall we discuss your immediate departure, or would you prefer a more thorough demonstration? The intruders retreated, their coordinated attack dissolving into confusion. Earth and Auroran security forces converged on the corridor, surrounding the would-be abductors. Bioelectrical discharge, Nirala explained to Jack as medical staff rushed to check her condition. A defensive adaptation all Aurorans possess, though we rarely display it to other species. Impressive, Jack said, still somewhat stunned by what he'd witnessed. Are you all right? The discharge requires considerable energy, she admitted, allowing herself to be guided to a medical chair. But the child is unharmed. I was careful to focus the energy outward. The attack, while unsuccessful, forced another relocation, this time to a military vessel jointly operated by Earth and Auroran forces. The ship maintained continuous movement, never establishing a predictable pattern that might allow another intercept attempt. As they settled into yet another temporary home, Jack found himself increasingly concerned about Nirala's well-being. The pregnancy was nearing its end, and the stress of repeated security threats was taking an obvious toll. You need rest, he insisted after finding her reviewing security protocols at 3 a.m. ship time. Doctor's orders. Diplomatic immunity, she countered with a tired smile. I outrank your doctors. Not the Auroran ones, he pointed out. Dr. Voss specifically said you need 8 hours of uninterrupted rest. Nirala sighed, setting aside her data tablet. I find it difficult to rest knowing there are still threats unaccounted for. The attackers were not hegemony. What? This was news to Jack. How do you know? Their energy signatures during my defensive discharge, she explained. The pattern was wrong for hegemony tech. These were mercenaries, using equipment designed to implicate the hegemony. A false flag operation, Jack said thoughtfully. But who would have the resources and motivation? I have my suspicions, Nirala said grimly. There are factions within the consortium itself who view this pregnancy as an abomination, a threat to Auroran genetic purity. They would prefer both the child and I disappear quietly, removing the embarrassment to our species. The revelation chilled Jack to the core. Your own people? Extremists, she clarified. Not the mainstream government, but powerful enough to access classified information and hire specialized operatives. We need to alert both security teams, Jack said, reaching for his communicator. Already done, Nirala assured him. I've provided the energy signature data to Dr. Voss, who will analyze it to confirm the source. Jack studied her with newfound appreciation. Even heavily pregnant and under constant threat, she remained 3 steps ahead. You're remarkable, he said simply. Nirala's scales rippled with an unusual pattern. Was that the Auroran equivalent of a blush? Survival necessity, she demurred. Politics on Aurora can be lethal. I'm beginning to understand why you were so effective in the council chamber, Jack admitted. When your life regularly depends on political maneuvering, you develop certain skills. Skills I'll teach our child, she said with sudden fierceness. They'll need every advantage to navigate the complex future ahead of them. Our child. The phrase still sent a strange thrill through Jack whenever she used it. The confirmation of Nirala's suspicions came 3 days later. The energy signatures matched specialized technology used by the consortium's internal security division, specifically a unit tied to a conservative political faction led by High Counselor Vex Talon, one of Nirala's longtime political rivals. Talon has been advocating for genetic isolation for decades, Nirala explained during an emergency briefing with both security teams. He sees any hybrid as a dilution of Auroran purity. A half-human child born to a prominent ambassador represents everything he opposes. We've intercepted communications indicating another attempt is planned, the Earth security chief reported, this time with significantly more resources. The child will be born within days, Dr. Voss added. Moving the ambassador again would present unacceptable medical risks. Then we stand and fight, Jack said firmly. This ship has the combined defensive capabilities of both our species. We make it clear that any approach will be met with maximum force. The Joint Earth-Auroran Security Council agreed, implementing unprecedented defensive measures around the vessel. Both governments issued formal diplomatic warnings that any attack on the ship would be considered an act of war against both species. In the midst of these escalating tensions, Nirala went into labor. Earlier than expected, Dr. Mbeki explained as Jack paced outside the medical bay. But all vital signs are strong. The hybrid physiology actually seems to be facilitating a smoother birth process than we anticipated. Jack nodded, too anxious to form a coherent response. Despite the circumstances of its conception and the diplomatic chaos that had followed, he found himself desperately invested in the health and safety of both Nirala and their child. After what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Voss emerged from the medical bay. Commander Reynolds, she said formally, Ambassador Tavin has successfully delivered a healthy female child. Both mother and daughter are doing well. The wave of relief that washed over Jack was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Can I see them? He asked, emotion making his voice rough. Dr. Voss nodded. The ambassador has requested your presence. Jack entered the medical bay to find Nirala propped up on a bio bed, looking exhausted but with her scales radiating a vibrant, healthy blue he'd never seen before. In her arms was a tiny bundle. Commander, she greeted him, her voice soft. Come meet your daughter. Jack approached cautiously, overwhelmed by the moment. The infant's appearance was a fascinating blend of both species, human facial features and body structure, but with delicate, nearly translucent scales that shifted color like Nirala's, though more subtly. Her eyes, when she briefly opened them, were human in shape, but with the deep, endless black of Auroran eyes. She's perfect, he whispered, reaching out a tentative finger that the baby immediately grasped with surprising strength. Her genetic structure is stable, Nirala said, the scientific assessment at odds with the tender way. She cradled the child. The doctors believe she will have advantages from both lineages, human adaptability with Auroran sensory capabilities and lifespan. Have you thought about a name? Jack asked, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. In Auroran tradition, children receive their formal name at a ceremonial presentation to society, Nirala explained. But I thought perhaps we might choose a preliminary name together. The gesture's significance wasn't lost on Jack. Nirala was offering a genuine partnership in their child's upbringing, despite everything that had transpired between them. "I'd be honored," he said sincerely. They were still discussing possibilities when the ship's alarms blared to life. Jack immediately moved to shield both Nirala and the baby, his body tensing for danger. "Multiple vessels approaching," announced the ship's security system. "Identification confirms Consortium Internal Security Division crafts. They are broadcasting demands for surrender of Ambassador Tavin and the hybrid child." "Over my dead body," Jack growled, reaching for the communicator to contact the bridge. To his surprise, Nirala caught his arm. "Wait," she said, her voice strangely calm. "There's another approaching vessel. Check the identification." Jack relayed the request to security. The response came back immediately. "Confirmed flagship of the Auroran High Council, commanded by Supreme Counselor Varen himself." Nirala's scales rippled with what Jack had come to recognize as satisfaction. "Perfect timing," she murmured. "You were expecting this?" Jack asked, confused. "Let's say I made certain contingency arrangements before the birth," Nirala replied enigmatically. "High Counselor Varen is my maternal cousin and the head of my political faction. I informed him of the birth and the threats from Talon's extremists. He has come to personally ensure our protection and to formally recognize our daughter as a citizen of the Auroran Consortium under his direct protection." The political implications were staggering. By bringing the Supreme Counselor himself to acknowledge the child, Nirala had effectively neutralized any claim that the baby was an embarrassment to be eliminated. Instead, she had transformed her daughter into a symbol of Auroran political power, endorsed by the highest authority. "That's remarkably strategic," Jack said, impressed despite himself. "I'm still an ambassador," Nirala reminded him with a hint of her old haughtiness. "Politics is what I do best." The confrontation in space was brief but decisive. The Supreme Counselor's flagship, backed by the joint Earth-Auroran defenders, issued a single demand for the internal security vessels to stand down. When they hesitated, the flagship disabled their propulsion systems with surgical precision. Within hours, High Counselor Varen himself arrived on their vessel, accompanied by an elite honor guard. Jack watched with a mixture of awe and anxiety as the Supreme Counselor, a tall, imposing Auroran with brilliantly golden scales, approached Nirala's medical bed, where she now sat formally dressed despite having given birth mere hours before. "Ambassador Tavin," the Supreme Counselor intoned formally. "The High Council has been informed of your unique circumstance and the birth of the first human Auroran child in our history." "Supreme Counselor," Nirala acknowledged with perfect diplomatic poise. "May I present my daughter and her father, Commander Jack Reynolds of Earth." The Supreme Counselor turned his obsidian gaze to Jack, who straightened to attention instinctively. "Commander Reynolds," Varen said, his melodic voice neutral, "your species continues to surprise us with its adaptability." "Thank you, Supreme Counselor," Jack replied, unsure if it was a compliment. Varen returned his attention to the infant, who regarded him with eerily intelligent eyes. "The child shows remarkable hybrid vigor," he observed. "The High Council has determined that this unprecedented birth represents not a dilution of Auroran heritage, but an evolution of it, a demonstration of our species' capacity to thrive even in unexpected circumstances." Jack realized he was witnessing a masterful political maneuver. The Supreme Counselor was reframing the entire narrative around the pregnancy, transforming what Talon's faction viewed as an embarrassment into a symbol of Auroran adaptability and strength. "The child will be formally recognized as a citizen of both worlds," Varen continued, "with all rights, privileges, and protections thereof. Furthermore, the High Council has approved the establishment of a specialized diplomatic division focused on human-Auroran relations, to be jointly led by Ambassador Tavin and Commander Reynolds, with their unique insight into both cultures." Jack struggled to maintain his diplomatic composure as he processed the implications. Not only was their child being officially recognized and protected, but he and Nirala were being offered positions that would allow them to raise her together while continuing their careers. "The Earth government has indicated preliminary approval of this arrangement," Varen added, clearly having negotiated with both sides before his arrival. Formal details will be established in the coming weeks. After the formal diplomatic exchanges were completed and the Supreme Counselor had departed, Jack found himself alone with Nirala and their daughter, the ship now surrounded by a protective fleet that guaranteed their safety. "You planned all of this," he said, not accusingly but with newfound respect. "Not from the beginning," Nirala admitted, gently rocking their sleeping child. "But once I understood I would keep this baby, I began positioning the political pieces to ensure her protection. Varen has been looking for an opportunity to outmaneuver Talon's faction for years. Our daughter provided the perfect catalyst. And us?" Jack asked. "This joint diplomatic position?" Nirala's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "It serves multiple purposes: political stability, practical parenting arrangements, and—" She hesitated, then continued with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "Perhaps a chance to explore what exists between us without the pressure of crisis or the burden of our initial misunderstanding." Jack sat carefully on the edge of her bed. "Are you suggesting we might actually have a future together? Beyond co-parenting?" "I'm suggesting we have an opportunity to find out," she replied carefully. "We are fundamentally different beings, from worlds and cultures that have little in common. And yet," she looked down at their daughter, "we created something extraordinary together, perhaps that deserves further exploration." Jack smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. "Ambassador Tavin, that's the most reasonable proposal I've heard from you yet." Her scales rippled with amusement. "Don't become accustomed to it, Commander Reynolds. I expect to thoroughly outmaneuver you in all future diplomatic negotiations." "I wouldn't have it any other way," he assured her, reaching out to touch his daughter's tiny hand. "She still needs a name." Nirala considered for a moment. In the Auroran tradition, names often reflect hope for the future. "What are your thoughts?" "Something that honors both heritages," Jack suggested. "A bridge between our worlds, like she is." Together, they chose a name that combined elements of both languages, unpronounceable to most humans but shortened to a sound Jack could manage, with a meaning that encompassed both their hopes for a future and the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 months later, a formal naming ceremony was held on neutral ground, a space station specifically constructed for joint Earth-Auroran diplomatic functions. Representatives from both governments attended, along with delegates from 17 other stellar nations curious about the unprecedented alliance. Jack stood beside Nirala, who held their daughter with practiced grace. They were no longer enemies or reluctant co-parents, but partners in the most unexpected diplomatic mission of their careers, raising the first human Auroran child as a bridge between their worlds. "Ready?" Jack asked quietly as they prepared to present their daughter formally to the assembled dignitaries. Nirala's scales rippled with determination and something that might almost be affection. "Always," she replied. Together, they stepped forward into their shared future, different in almost every way, united by the child between them, and faced with the monumental task of forging peace between their worlds one day at a time. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since that fateful encounter on the observation deck, both felt genuinely hopeful about the path forward. The child in Nirala's arms, unaware of the diplomatic significance of her existence or the complex history of her creation, simply gazed at the assembled crowd with her father's facial structure and her mother's endless black eyes, a living embodiment of possibility in an ever-expanding universe.